These two movements, these two types of action that I impart on my soft plastic lures when fishing isolated targets or very specific areas have caught me so many bass, and I have it broken down into two categories: soft plastics that lay flat on the bottom, and then soft plastics that stand up. Think your shaky heads, Ned rigs, those types of things. Now my goal, and the goal for many of us, is to have these lures look as realistic as possible without scaring the bass off. Now, of course, when the bass are super aggressive, it doesn't seem to matter what we do, but when they're kind of shy or wary or really investigating things, that natural movement is key. Now, oftentimes you'll see some of the best bass anglers in the world, right, really bouncing their rods quite a bit. But what is often misunderstood or is not explained very well is that bouncing most of the time is happening on a very slack line, not a tight line. And when we bounce that rod, okay, with a pretty good bow in the line, it imparts such a realistic action on our lures that lay flat on the bottom. It just so much looks like some sort of little creature, you know, rooting around on the bottom, or just the smallest little movements, and it's enough to grab the attention from a bass that's a ways away, okay? A little bit of movement to get that lateral line activated, but when they come right up to it and look at it, it's not so much sudden movement that it startles them and turns them off from the lure either. I love to do this on an insert tube weight with a tube jig, and it just looks so good. A lot of people out there, Mark Zona calls it cracking a tube. Very, very effective. The other one I'm using here is just a Texas rigged stick bait, right? So we think of a stick bait that doesn't have a lot of action to it, like a, you know, a ribbon tail worm would. But when you take a look at it here on the bottom with this slack line bouncing, just how incredible it looks, and it's just the subtle, slightest action that can get those fish to commit. Now the other one that I like to use this on is either a shaky head or a Ned rig, but both of them, the key, at least in my opinion, is using that Elastec worm, okay, so it stands up straight. Now this particular method is more of a tight line method, okay? It's not like the big slack in the line that we just talked about, although that would work perfectly fine. But I like to take the rod and then imagine like you squeeze that rod, okay? And when you really squeeze down your hand, you feel like kind of your whole arm quiver, right? You feel that muscle tension, that muscle quiver. Well, that's what I'm doing with the rod. I'm squeezing that rod, and that pulse sensation travels through the rod and the line, and this is why having a little bit tighter line is important. And then just look at that quiver that the bait has. It is just incredible. That tail just stands up and quivers, 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 looks so natural. Then I can pause and just let it sit there and let the natural movements in the water kind of, you know, swing that tail around, and then I can just squeeze that rod again and get that pulsing action as well. And hey, if you'd like to watch a video that talks about 3 different ways to help stop that frustration of missing bass when we get a bite and it's a swing and a miss, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.